Welcome into the newest episode of Side Mission. I, like always, am your host, Rusty Ellis, joined by a full house of boys today. We got Kyle, we got Matt, and we got Thacker, and we are talking about what has been the most anticipated game, I would say, of the year, but I feel like realistically, this has got to be like the most anticipated game since like probably 2018 when the God of War game that year came out. We are talking about God of War Ragnarok, the sequel to 2018's God of War. Won Game of the Year then. And to give you a spoiler alert, it'll probably win Game of the Year this year, deservedly so. So, let's go ahead and get the boys in here. It's going to be a long episode. Get your popcorn ready. Let's dive right in. So, Kyle, you were the one that got me big into God of War 2018. I had never played a game in the franchise before this game. I played it because of you. You're also the reason I platinumed that game, and you're the reason why, as of recording this, I'm 4 trophies away from this platinum. So tell me, what do you think this game improves upon from the 2018 game? Because I think we all agree that 2018 God of War, 10 out of 10 game, masterpiece of a game, it won Game of the Year for 2018. But this game does a lot of things to improve it. What were some improvements that stuck out to you?
Yeah, this game really did a lot. I mean, when it comes to the characters, to the worlds, to the combat, I mean, like, there is just so much. But I'll kind of break it down more so to what stuck out to me was the talismans, I think, are so much more useful in this game. I find myself using them quite honestly in just about every boss fight.
Yeah.
The rage differences as well. Being able to choose between using, like your rage for a quick burst of attacks with whatever weapon you're holding, or you can do the classic rage where you just have the full meter to just go to town on the enemy. Or now you can, use your rage to actually regain health.
Yes.
Which is what I used a lot in some of these boss fights because I cannot stress enough how much that will save you due to the fact that it will actually stun the enemy while you heal. So I felt like that was one of the best improvements that they made on the game.
For me personally, I think a great addition that has definitely helped out the combat and the core RPG mechanics of God of War was the introduction of the Idrisul amulet.
Yes,
which
I love
are
that.
these fragments. They're these fragments that you find scattered throughout the realms, and when you collect them and you go to the blacksmith, you increase the number of them that you can use, but they have so many different like perks and abilities, which I'm not going to get into all of them. There's so many. But what's cool is that each one of them, I'll just call them gems, is represented by the realms themselves. Like they'll have the name, like for example, they'll have like Muspelheim, like wisdom or something along the lines like that.
Yeah, or like Asgard virtue or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's so many of them that like each person playing this game will have a different experience because it's just based off your personal preference, which goes along so well with the variety of weapons, like from shields and like just upgrades to the axe and the blades of chaos.
And honestly, Matt, like you're forgetting one that honestly just changed the entire improvement for this game. Bringing in the drop near spear.
Yes.
That was something that we all know God of War for the Blades of Chaos and then 2018 for the Leviathan axe. Getting the drop near spear was something totally impressive to actually have a new weapon mechanic that we now can cycle through and actually be able to use. It was something that was honestly an amazing improvement just to have that third weapon.
I agree. Kind of varied the combat up a little bit, and I think the combat shines in this game much like it did in 2018. I think that's one thing that stayed, that definitely got better was the combat. I will say this, we all expected this to be a more expansive game in every way. We expected combat to be a little bit deeper, a little bit more involved. We expected weapons to kind of be a little bit more, to have a little bit more variety. I will say I love the way the Blades of Chaos play in this game because they don't play that much like the 2018 game. They're more used for grabbing enemies, throwing enemies, slamming them down to the ground, and kind of juggling, whereas the axe kind of plays exactly the same. The thing that really sticks out to me, and we've all said this multiple times. I know, Kyle, we've talked a lot about it. Thacker, I know we've talked about it. It is amazing when you start thinking about just how big this game is, just how massive the scope of this game is. You go to all 9 realms in this game, in the story, which you didn't do in 2018. In 2018, you didn't go to Svartalfheim, you didn't go to Vanaheim, and you didn't go to Asgard, obviously. You went to the 6 other realms, unless I'm including one that we didn't go to. I think those were the only 3 we didn't go to. But it's not even just the fact that you go to all 9. It's the fact that Vanaheim, which is obviously where Freya is from, that's, being a Vanir goddess, Vanaheim feels like the size of one open world game. It is a massive map, and you could say the same for Svartalfheim. Midgard's pretty sizable. Asgard, for the time that you get to be there, is pretty big. Like, it feels like every area has some good size to it, with the exception of probably Niflheim and Muspelheim, and that's really just because you go there for 1 or 2 things in the story, and then there's a lot of side content in both places. I say a lot. In Niflheim, there's 1 or 2 things. In Muspelheim, there's the Crucible, which we'll talk about that later. But the way they were able to expand on this world and make every realm feel different, I think the one I was most impressed with outside of Vanaheim was probably Alfheim, because Alfheim, I'm on record as saying, not my favorite part of God of War 2018. It's kind of the part that I rushed through because I don't love playing through that section. It's kind of boring, and there's not really a lot of variety to it. But they really added on to Alfheim and made it feel like an entirely different area compared to the first game. So Sony Santa Monica did a fantastic job, I think, in the world-building aspect of really expanding on what we knew about this universe already. So, with that being said, this is a spoiler warning for the rest of the episode. Even though Thacker just spoiled a massive part of it with Dropnir. Even though he just spoiled that. This is a spoiler warning for the rest of the episode. We are about to go in depth with the story of God of War Ragnarok. And I think we can all 4 agree. And Kyle, Matt, y'all can go ahead and unmute. I have no problem with y'all. Nobody has to be muted for this. It's all good. I think we can all agree the story of God of War Ragnarok is best experienced when you have no idea what's going to happen. When you have no idea the twists and the turns the story takes and what certain characters do, that is the best way to experience the game. So if you want to play the game spoiler-free, do not listen to the rest of this episode, because we're going to spoil the ever-loving shit out of this game. And that's the nice way of me saying it. So,
and forget that Thacker said Dropnir.
And forget that he said Dropnir. That too.
Oh my god.
And the fact that Matt said I vape in the chat. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into the story to get caught up. If you haven't listened to mine and Thacker's discussion episode, real brief recap of the 2018 game. You end up killing one of the sons of Odin. You kill Baldur. You kill him. You kill him as Kratos, and essentially you begin the path to Ragnarok. You set Fimbulwinter off, and you start the path to Ragnarok, the downfall of the Aesir, and the downfall of Odin. You begin that. So this game picks up right in the middle of Fimbulwinter. Atreus is a couple years older. Kratos is still the same deep-voiced, loving father that he was in the first game. Boy, my favorite line from the first game. Love it. But you start off right there in the beginning, and at this point, Freya is still very much an enemy of you. You start off with a very interesting combat. I don't want to say combat, very interesting cinematic section. And Kyle, I want to hear from you on this, because I feel like that's something that the first game did so well, was those cinematic moments where he kind of melded gameplay into cutscene, and it all works without there being a loading screen. I feel like this opening sequence really does start us off on the right foot.
Oh yeah, dude, introducing the entire part with the wolves and the sled, because I knew, I was like, this is how we're going to end up traversing everything, because it's frozen. Obviously, we saw from the trailers, and, we knew that.
Despite the fact that Matt was surprised by the Lake of Nine being frozen every time he went to it, despite that.
Yeah, I was excited, though, when I saw, us going through that, and then out of nowhere just transitions to a cutscene while we're in the middle of, essentially sledding down, this hill with these dogs or with these wolves. And when Freya comes in, it's just, immediately shit's about to get real. And we get that classic, God of War 2018 transition from gameplay to cinematic that
Yes.
honestly is, in my opinion, one of the greatest art directions I've ever seen taken in a game. To do an entire one take where the camera does not break, it's insane. It's impressive,
No jump cuts.
in my opinion.
No jump cuts,
Yeah.
and I love that. It really keeps you immersed in what's happening.
I loved the way this game, started out, aside from the fact that we had to endure the death of Fenrir.
So that's what I was going to ask y'all next, actually.
That was sad.
Like, obviously, we know what happens later in the story, and we know that Fenrir isn't gone. I don't think any of us felt that way in the moment. Thacker, what did you feel about that? Because we discussed Fenrir. He was one character we were expecting to see when we talked about what our expectations were for Ragnarok. What did you feel about that? How did you feel about that decision early on?
Honestly, I was really blown away from it. It was one that I really didn't know how to feel about it, especially because it, like, for one, like, you gotta love Fenrir.
Yes.
Like, you absolutely gotta love him. And then from the beginning of the game, just instantly having him pulled away was kind of heart-wrenching.
That's one thing
really,
I said this about this story. It really punches you in the gut right from the jump.
It does. And especially for anyone who's a pet lover.
Yes.
Or a dog lover or anything kind of animal lover, that really hurts. That really hurts to see, especially like a young adult, young child, whatever you want to say, seeing their best friend as an animal being taken away from them like that's heart-wrenching. Santa Monica did really well at really hitting feels on this.
I think that they did a great job throughout the entire game with emotion, and that's where, when it comes to the writing, I don't know that there's many that I think are better right now at it than Sony Santa Monica. I think maybe Naughty Dog when it comes to the Last of Us games, the Uncharted games, maybe them, maybe Insomniac, because they've done a really, really good job with writing in their last couple of games. But I feel like that's one of the biggest strengths of this game is the way the writing is they're able to depict emotion instead of telling you what they're feeling, they're showing you what they're feeling. And that's a huge thing in writing, to where you don't have to say, oh, well, you don't want the character to say I'm angry or I'm sad. You want them to show that. And I feel like this game does an incredible job with that.
Amazing job.
In that same note, I feel like this is the beginning of, we really see the evolution of Kratos and Atreus' relationship. We see that, yes, like, it's not the same as it was in 2018. There's still obviously, Atreus cares about Kratos, Kratos cares about Atreus, but obviously we all know what we saw, or what we thought we saw, at the end of God of War. We saw the mural in Jotunheim that we figured was depicting Kratos' death and him dying in Atreus' arms. Now, we'll get to more of that in a bit, but we see now that there's so much of a difference. Obviously, Atreus has his goals. He has the things he wants to. He has things that he's trying to accomplish. And Matt, I want to hear from you about this, because one of those things he's trying to do, and you see a lot of this in a lot of the promotional material, he wants to find Tyr, the god of war from this realm. He wants to find Tyr because he believes that Tyr is the key to, leading Ragnarok and to, maybe stopping Odin. And I feel like that's the first major story beat we go on. But I want to say there were not many scenes in this game, outside of one other that I can think of that I'm going to talk about later, that gave me the kind of chills as it did when Thor and Odin show up on your doorstep. And in the first 20 minutes of the game, Matt, you're face to face with the God of Thunder and the All-Father himself. Please tell me I was not alone in that, Matt.
So when that scene happened, I actually do like the callback to the original, real ending to God of War 2018 with Thor,
yes,
right there at your doorstep.
And it's the same scene. And it's the same scene. I love that.
It is the same scene. But then, Thor's really chill. He's just like, can we have a chat, just to go in to talk about these things. And that was a really like that whole entire scene. I was like, where's this gonna go? Because like I was expecting there to be a fight scene like right away, but there's a lot of like dialogue here, and then um what is it? Odin shows up, and then you're just like, okay, shit's gonna go down. Like, what's going on? Thor and Odin are here in Kratos' home, but it just turns into this conversation. But Odin is trying to persuade Kratos, and technically he's trying to mostly persuade Atreus from looking for Tyr, because Odin knows what that would bring when it comes to the whole lore of Ragnarok. So obviously Kratos does not want Atreus having anything to do with a deal with Odin, and then
Yes.
that is when it turns into like. And I just love this little scene where Odin gets up, walks away, and just whispers to Thor, "What is it? He
Don't
says
take
exactly,
all day. Don't take all day.
take all day.
When he said that, my eyes got wide. I said, "Oh boy, here we go."
Oh, yeah.
In my head, I heard "and action."
Oh yeah. And in that moment, you see Mjolnir, and then Kratos just gets blasted out of his home, and we get one of the most epic boss fights that I think we will see
For a long
all
time.
generation.
Yes,
All
I agree.
generation.
So
So
Kyle,
much fun.
Kyle, I want you, and I said this in the chat that we were using. I want you to brag on Ryan Hurst, because when we found out that he was cast to play Thor, we were both immediately excited, knowing the possibilities. We know the vocal talent of Ryan Hurst, the acting talent of Ryan Hurst from obviously Sons of Anarchy is what he's really known for. I feel like he nails this performance.
100%. Ryan Hurst was so good as Thor. I mean, he was so menacing, but at the same time, like, there are more scenes that you see later on that show more of a human side of Thor, and they really start to,
Yes.
show him in a different light. And boy, the voice acting it took to pull off different, sides of this character. It's very easy to do a one-dimensional character, but I mean, to show, all these different parts. They showed Thor, angry. They showed Thor being a family man, trying to take care of his family. They showed Thor getting drunk and dealing with, depression and, feeling like, he's just the outcast and like he's been let down. I loved Thor as a character, and honestly, at the end of this game, it left me wanting more.
Thacker, I agree 100% with you, and I will let you talk about Richard Schiff next, because he nails Odin in this role as well.
It was incredible. It took me a good, 2 or 3 times listening to his voice before I finally nailed it.
Same, dude. I was like, holy shit, when I figured out who it was. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And the fact that not only did they get his voice right, if you look, Odin actually looks like him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see it. I could certainly see it. I think that he absolutely kills. I think one thing, can we all agree on this? I don't think there's a weak performance in this game vocally. I feel like the entire cast does an excellent job. Christopher Judge
Hands down.
has become one of my favorite voice actors just for Kratos alone. I would love to see him do other roles as well. Sonny Soljic really is even better as Atreus, but I want to brag on here, and I feel like in some of the promotional material, again, they talk about this. They had to, when recording and shooting this game and producing this game, we got to remember, Sonny was not as old as he is now when God of War 2018 was being made. So he's going through he's going through puberty, he's getting older, his voice is getting a little deeper. I think they handled that all very well, because it feels very accurate to Atreus from 2018 to now. It feels like that growth has happened. So he is absolutely awesome. I think that my favorite performance in this game is probably Danielle Basutti as Freya, though. I feel like she ate this role up. And I am very, very happy with the direction they went in with her character. So we'll kind of get rolling down. And again, Robert Craighead and Adam J. Harrington as Brock and Sindri. They're both fantastic in this as well. Alistair Duncan's great as Mimir once again. There's so many other performances in this game that we just can't get to right now. But Brett Dalton as Freya's brother. He's, for anyone who doesn't know that name, that's Michael from Until Dawn. That's one of the. That's Michael from Until Dawn, and that's again just the range there from playing a role like that to playing Freya's brother Freyr. The range on Brett Dalton really impressed me in this game. I really liked his role in this game as well. I thought Heimdall was well voiced. Lady Sif is well voiced. I thought that across the board the performances were fantastic. So getting back into the story, you fight Thor and you kind of Tyr as well. Tyr is really, really well done as well. But you kind of get this feeling as Kratos that, okay, now our home's not safe. What do? You go and you live with Sindri. Which, did anybody else kind of chuckle when they realized that, oh, you're just going and bunking with a dwarf? That was kind of funny.
Right.
And you see his house.
His house is massive. His house is massive.
Dwarf size. Like,
dude,
what?
It's massive. Sindri's bringing in the money, man. And I love how it's in the realm between realms. I think that's an awesome hub area for this game. Really, really liked that as well. So you go and you find Tyr. You find him in a mine in Svartalfheim. And it's kind of not what Atreus expected. And Kyle, this is an interesting point in the story because you could kind of see, Atreus is trying to do whatever he can to get to a certain point, get his fate to a certain point. And he's expecting Tyr, when he finds him, to be this guy who's ready to lead an army into war at Ragnarok. And Tyr doesn't want to fight. And it's a very, very interesting dynamic how that changes things.
It was pretty crazy when they rescued Tyr and brought him back, because there was this moment, and we saw it, kind of in the trailer where they first meet Tyr, but when Tyr stood up and just towered over Kratos, I was like, holy shit, that's a
great
big
moment.
dude. That was pretty epic, because you were like, yo, this is a big guy. We are really getting some beef on our side. And then he turns out to be this pacifist, and I thought it was weird because I was like, I thought you were about to help us kill Odin. But then, he had, all of these good reasons as to why he didn't want to fight and why he's become pacifist. And I kind of accepted it over time. And it wasn't until a very specific part in the game that
it all makes sense.
I realized something was off. Why doesn't he fight? Why does he sleep in the broom closet? Why is this the god of war?
But it's almost like he's tired of fighting.
Yeah, when he addresses war, he wants nothing to do with it.
I want to say, though, and we'll get to the twist that happens when we get to it, I feel like they hit it very well until the very last moment when they kind of give it away, and I feel like that was intended, obviously with a little bit of line of dialogue and what he calls a certain character. I feel like they did a very good job of hiding it, because obviously in hindsight we see all the different ways we feel like they could have, hinted at it or kind of given us clues as to who he is and why he is the way he is. But instead, I feel like they hit it very, very well on a first-time playthrough. I feel like, obviously, the beginning of the game will hit a lot differently if you play through it again. But a very interesting thing happens in the story, and Matt, this was, for me, the first, outside of Fenrir, that was a big emotional moment. This was the first moment where I was like, okay, stuff might be about to go down. And that's when Atreus runs away after a certain point. And we're jumping ahead in the story here a little bit because there's a lot of, filler that you miss in between there. You meet Freyr, you go to Vanaheim, all this. And obviously, and you get Freya back on your side, which, Thacker, that is what I was telling you. We called the shit out of that in our discussion episode. We said...
Oh, we so did.
We said that we thought that Freya would be brought back to your side in one way or another. We thought that would happen, and I love that they did it. It was an excellent character arc for Freya. But Matt, Atreus runs away and goes to Asgard to learn from Odin. And I feel like this is the first moment in the game where you're like, the shit might be about to go down here.
Yeah, and honestly, I really like that they took that direction, because this whole entire game is basically, wanting to defy fate, go against what the prophecy said. And I like the fact that with Loki intentionally going to Odin, going to Asgard, that it is starting to feel like that it's becoming exactly that. And when he gets there, I like how they started off with him just being dropped off, but outside of the wall.
Yep.
And then you get like this nice little section of having to climb this thing, and like I was kind of like, I have a fear of heights, so I'm like, don't look down, because I'm like really, really high up. And so, when you get there, you meet Heimdall, who is this cocky little bastard, like with so much attitude. I'm like, this is completely different than Idris Elba from Thor.
Can I just say one of my favorite lines in the game was when he you get to the top and he grabs you and he goes, "So
Yes.
tell me, what part of the gigantic wall made you think, let me climb that?"
Yes, exactly.
What made you think you were wanted here when you saw the gigantic wall blocking you off from Asgard? What made you think you were wanted here? And it was just the perfect level of sarcasm to be expected. That was probably the first character where I was like, holy shit, that's a massive figure in Norse mythology that we have not seen yet. Like, holy shit, that's fucking Heimdall. Like, that whole section was crazy, Matt.
I kind of knew it straight from the moment that you look at his eyes that it's Heimdall, because that's his whole shtick.
And it reveals him. I love how it kind of reveals him, because you figure out who he is, because when he turns around, you see Gallarhorn on his back. You see the horn on his back. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my god, it's him. Like, it's Heimdall. Yep. And again, Thacker, we called it. I will not listen to anybody. Nobody will slander myself or Thacker outside of me from now on, because we fucking called half this shit. Matt, continue.
I loved it.
I also enjoyed the fact that you kind of got to see Asgard, like the outside of it. It wasn't exactly as I pictured it, to be honest with you.
It was more modest, yeah.
Exactly. It wasn't like big giant castle that I saw in Assassin's Creed Valhalla when you go to Asgard. There,
it's not like you see it in like Thor and like Marvel.
Exactly.
It's not like that either. Yeah.
Exactly. So I thought that was a really nice take on Asgard, because it was more grounded, just like the lore that we're getting in this game. Like, obviously there's a lot of like really crazy things, but you see Asgard for the first time, and it's not what I was expecting. And I thought it was really cool as you're going along, that you see Valkyrie's training, you see just like the regular citizens, and then out of nowhere you get to what is where Odin's area, his keep is, or whatever.
Yeah.
And you get thrown into a boss fight with Heimdall, and you can't hit this guy. Thank you, his lodge. And you cannot hit this guy. And I was like, how long is this fight going to last? Because, I kind of like 5 minutes of just swinging, and then, cutscene happened. Really, really well done cutscene with Odin popping up and everything just shifting off from there. And then we finally find out exactly what it is Odin wants from Atreus. And he reassures him he doesn't want war. He does not want, anything bad to happen to Atreus and his friends. And to give, Atreus the trust, because that's the recurring theme in this game is trust.
Yes.
Atreus needing to trust Odin needing Atreus' trust. And it's kind of like, and what I like about this is the parallels of these two characters' trust, because Kratos and Atreus also have that whole entire theme of trust. So They did a fantastic job with the parallels of Odin, Atreus, Kratos, and Atreus.
Yeah, I agree.
And I like the introduction that we get to meet Thor's daughter, Thrud, which is great. We get to meet Lady Sif.
Yep.
Which was also great. Like, they really did such a good job, and it was really well done. And I like the fact that we're branching off from gameplay of Kratos, which I kind of did think that we were going to get to play as Atreus without Kratos, which was awesome. So really, really well done.
Yeah, it was cool how we got to play as Atreus.
And he didn't play like Kratos. That's the thing I loved, is he feels different, and that's so important in gameplay, that he feels different.
He felt like his own character.
Yes.
He really did feel like his own character, especially in the part where you first go to Asgard as Atreus, and you start meeting all of these townfolk, and they tell you that, oh, well, Odin lives up behind that big wall, and Atreus just says, fuck it, I'm going to climb this. And he, for real, just starts climbing this entire, I can't even tell you how many thousands of miles high wall and you encounter the worst enemy in the game, the fucking whites. They are the worst enemy in the game.
You're not wrong. I hated them.
Are they so damn strong? That first one that you fought as Atreus, dude, I was like, am I fighting a fucking boss? This dude was so tough. And maybe my Atreus was just extremely weak. But I felt like he was just immune to anything I threw at him, and I was just having to whittle away his health. And then, when he dies, he spawns into 3 little fucking... whatever the little balls, I can't remember what they are.
Little
wisps. They spawn on the little fucking wisps, and I'm like, can you not just be dead? That's all I had to say about that.
You're not wrong. I absolutely hated the whites, and that sounds so horrible to say without context. Somebody's gonna clip this, and that's not good. But
you heard it here first. Fuck the whites.
Okay.
We're getting canceled tonight, boys.
All right. So
you don't get canceled. We're going after the whites.
That's true. So back on the farm. So I have to ask, when we found out that Odin was trying to put a mask together, did anybody else first think of Jim Carrey?
Yeah.
Oh, man, I really did.
Yeah. Glowing green mask, absolutely.
It glowed green, so I was like, oh, Jim Carrey!
It's literally the mask. It's literally the mask.
Smoking.
It's literally smoking. It's literally that. Like, but I loved that you got to go on missions with Thor, like, as Atreus. I really liked the dynamic between the two, and you can really see it's a very, very simple relationship, but you can see it growing over time, and I really, again, think they did a good job with the writing and all that. I think that's why it works. You obviously meet Thrud, Thor's daughter, and Matt couldn't pronounce her name before we got on here, so I'm really proud of him for being able to pronounce it. And again, all of the dialogue is really, and the writing is really what sells every bit of the story, because it all feels very true to character. It feels like if this conversation actually happened, this is how it would happen. So Atreus ends up leaving Asgard after, helping with the mask for a little bit. He ends up leaving and going back. And at this point, like, we are deep on the road to Ragnarok. We are deep on the road. So now, after a few events transpire, we get to the ultimate plot twist in the game. And that's that after you get Freyr out of Vanaheim, you essentially save Vanaheim in the moment. You get Freyr out, he comes back with you to Sindri's house. You're there with him, Brock, Sindri obviously, Freya, Atreus, and Tyr. And Tyr starts to go into this whole monologue about how, I know I've been a burden on you all, and about how Mimir's, well, shut up, Thacker. Everyone knows Mimir's there. Anyways, he's going into this monologue about how he's been a burden to everybody, and about how, he's ready to lead them into Ragnarok, and he's ready to lead them to Asgard, and that he's got this new secret way. And the moment he says that, Brock kind of asks the question that everybody's thinking is like, so you've known this the whole time, and you just now are bringing it up. And it's funny because, Kyle, we've talked a lot about God of War 2018, where there are several moments where Brock will say something and Mimir will just kind of be like, I don't know what the fuck he just said. That's kind of weird. Like,
yeah.
But even Mimir, when Brock says that, he goes, that's actually a really good question. Like, when did this happen? And you kind of feel like something's off. And then Tyr says something along the lines of, after Kratos questions him about, withholding this information, Tyr tells him, well, you would have gotten us killed, we weren't ready, and plus we needed Loki to figure out his destiny. And that was the very moment I knew that Tyr was Odin the entire time. That was the very fucking moment that I knew Tyr was Odin, because the only people that had called Atreus Loki, who obviously it's revealed that that's the name that the Giants gave him at the end of the 2018 game, the only people that called him that were the Aesir. The only people that called him that were the people in Asgard. So when he says that, it's kind of that trigger of, wait a minute, did he just call him that when he hasn't called him that all game? It's one of those where it's like, did Tyr have a slow moment? Is Tyr kind of stupid? I can't really tell what just happened. And then, Thacker, the ultimate gut punch happens, because Tyr reveals who he is, and he kills Brock in the process.
It hurt so much. I know it hurt
hurts.
more for Brock, but it hurt.
That shit hurt.
It actually
Like,
hurt.
It just
it
goes
hit hard.
back.
Can I say
It
one
goes
more thing,
back
Thacker?
to-
One of the worst part about all of it is that right before this scene happens, Brock has his best line in the entire game when they're talking about going to Asgard, and Sindri goes, "And how exactly do you expect to get to Asgard?" And Brock fires back, "I expect you to buy my big blue butt cheek." It's the best line.
Dude.
Like, forget the death can have me when it earns me. Forget that line. That is the pinnacle of writing right there. Go ahead,
Best
Thacker.
line.
But not like it. Santa Monica did amazing with this again, with just hitting every emotion. Because you also find out earlier in the game, when you first start playing as Atreus, that Brock is missing part of his soul.
Yes.
So, like, it tells you later on in the game, but it makes you wonder in that moment of, can't we just go back and get his souls back? Like, it explains it later on, but still, that entire moment there was just so heart-wrenching. You knew something was about to happen. You knew shit was about to hit the fan, but you didn't know what was going to happen until it did. And it's like, really?
Yeah, this was wild.
Oh, it hurt. It hurt.
So I have to ask,
when-
before we... Oh, go ahead, Kyle. My bad.
Oh, I was say when they told us about Brock missing his soul pieces, I knew. I was like, there's a very significant reason to telling us that. And my thought process was we were going to get some sort of side mission where you get to go to Helheim and get Brock's last soul piece back. And it turned out to be so much darker than that, because in reality, because he doesn't have all of his soul pieces, you can't get it back. And that, I think, was what hurt the most. Because when Sindri said, "Oh, I went to Helheim, I got him back," the moment he died, I was like, "Yo, we got to get him back." And then they said that, and I was like, "What do you mean we can't?" That was so gut-wrenching to know that he's actually gone. Like, there's no, it's not like the Fenrir death at the beginning of the game. He's done. That really made me sad.
It hurt.
I just want to add with this whole talking about Brock, like there was a scene when they were supposed to meet the lady, and this is where
Yes.
kind of Brock realizes as to why, because I believe it's Mimir who says that she responds to the spirit or something along the lines like that.
And because he doesn't have
She
that, that's why
interacts with
she...
your soul.
And that's why she didn't interact with him, because he was excited to interact with her, and she didn't even...
Yes.
It's like she didn't even know he was there.
But yeah, they added that really touching moment where Kratos asked Brock to bless the spear, and this is obviously where we're going back with the spear being like why this whole entire segment of the game is happening. And I just like that little touching moment between Kratos and Brock where, he makes him feel good. He makes him feel like, he just learned about this kind of, he doesn't quite know it yet, but he's caught on to what's happened. So getting that whole little moment there was a really nice touch.
Yeah, I
The
think
character
that...
development was perfect.
I think that that's something in this game, we've said it so many times and I can't rave enough about it, is that the emotion of, like, every time this game needs to hit an emotional high, it hits it. Every time, it does not miss. And it doesn't matter the characters either. I mean, Sindri and Brock were both more comedic relief characters in the first game. They weren't there as... like serious characters that were a big part of this, this big massive story. They were very, very small parts of the 2018 game, and in this game, they both take a major step forward, and they're able to land on these moments. And I feel like what happens with Brock and how that changes Sindri for the entire rest of the game, the follow-up scene to Brock's death, when you go and you go to the shop at Tyr's Temple to find Sindri, and he just tells me, if you want to help me, get the fuck out of my sight. And it is just chilling to see a character that we have seen for hours now, for, a 20-plus hour game in the first game, and now deep into another, 30, 40-hour game here. It's chilling to see a character that has been a source of comedy go to that dark of a place. And I will say there's a moment at the end that is a very, very cool moment for Sindri. We're not going to get there just yet. But, continuing on with the story, you now realize that with Tyr at this point is no longer on your side, and he never was in the first place. You no longer have the drop on Odin, and now your best bet is to start Ragnarok. Your best bet is to try to start Ragnarok, but Thacker, to do so, there's one important figure that has to be crossed off the board first, and that is Heimdall.
Oh, yeah.
And we called that we would fight him, and fighting him is every bit as terrifying as you said it would be in that episode.
It was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. I probably would have been on that fight for a good, 30 minutes if it wasn't for you giving me a hint of how to, initiate damage to him. And it was... the entire time I was sitting there what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And it was only a 2-phase fight, but still absolutely horrendous amount, or not horrendous, but absolutely immense amount of fear going through me for the first phase, knowing that there was probably going to be a second.
Oh, for sure. When he came roading in on that, I was like, there's no way this is the only part of the fight. And I think people that don't understand Norse mythology or don't understand the backstory of this, the reason why Heimdall is such a key figure is obviously because Odin trusted him with Gjallarhorn. And for those that don't know, the sounding of that horn is what begins Ragnarok. That is why Heimdall was needed to be crossed off the board or needed to be taken out before, and Freya makes this clear, is because if Odin has Heimdall on his side, there's next to nothing that the quote-unquote good guys can do to win. There is next to nothing because he can see everything that's going to happen before it happens. So I also liked the callback to the original series here because I liked that as you're choking out Heimdall, he's talking about you being the god killer and how you'll never change and stuff like that. And you kind of get this look of horror on Kratos' face after Heimdall is killed, and he's like, I really just did that. And after everyone said that maybe for the sake of the prophecy, I probably shouldn't have done that. So I thought that was really interesting. Kyle, what did you have to add?
Yeah, that part I was pretty surprised by because it really showed a level of emotional depth to Kratos. Obviously, a big talking point of the 2018 game was how much more mature Kratos feels.
Yes.
Yeah.
Compared to the original trilogy. And I think this game took that and expanded on it tenfold because even in the 2018 game, Kratos has some emotional moments, but for the most part, he's still very much holding in that anger as well as that fear of losing Atreus. And it causes him to, do everything that he's doing. All the decisions he's making are to protect Atreus. And in this game, it really, really showed, the maturity of his character being able to separate, I wouldn't say a rational fear of Atreus dying, but I would say being able to trust Atreus to go off on his own, to do things on his own.
Yeah.
It was such a big step for Kratos, and I think that definitely should be highlighted because it takes a lot to really build, a story arc like that for a character that originally was pretty one-dimensional. And now, we saw him, take on this role of the father and really, go through all the beats, all the emotions. And by the end of this game, I felt like Kratos went on this crazy emotional journey that, is going to reflect on future games should they choose to do more.
And honestly, Kyle, I feel like part of that stems from where Mimir, Freya, and Kratos go and talk to the Norms.
Yes.
Being the fates of this world. It was something that they prophesized all of this. They pretty much told Kratos, hey, in order for you to protect your son, you're going to have to do this stuff. And it's going to end up in Ragnarok and somebody dying. Like, the Norms literally took that prophecy that we saw at the end of 2018 and ran with it and added more to it even more so that from Angry Boda, from what she was saying in the beginning as well, they really kind of added more to Kratos's own development, more so than any other part, just from the short amount of time they were in the game.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it just reminded me. Do you remember when, they were talking about the prophecy, how they were saying, Kratos, you are going to kill Heimdall, you are going to start Ragnarok. Everything that they said came true, except for the part where they said you were going to die.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like, maybe with the, additional content, maybe there's side stuff, but I felt like we should have had some other implications of Kratos not dying because it was prophesied. And as this game showed, just about everything that was prophesied happened, but what are the consequences of going against the prophecy?
So I have a theory as to why he didn't die. I have a theory. And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and then we'll jump back. So do you remember in the middle of Ragnarok, they're in Asgard and, it's after Sindri comes back. And you remember, Odin's got the citizens, the mortal human citizens of Asgard, manning these cannons, and they end up dying, and he's sacrificing innocent lives, for people that are not fit for combat. And Atreus has this moment because all that's talked about is we need vengeance, we need justice, all this, and that, and the other, and the theme of one of the things that Kratos says to Atreus early on in 2018 is, close your heart to the sufferings of those that we will meet along the way. He mentions that, and Atreus is still working on that in this game. You hear him say several times where he's telling himself, close your heart to it, close your heart to it. I think the moment Kratos changed fate was when, instead of allowing Ragnarok to happen the way it was going to happen, instead of allowing, Surtur to wreak havoc the way he was going to wreak havoc, he tells them, he calls everybody, he signals everybody, and he says, hey, we can't do this for vengeance anymore. We're not going to risk innocent lives. We're not going to kill innocents. We are only going to kill those trying to kill us. And I think that is the exact moment, because you see how everybody reacts to it. Like he tells Freyr and Freya to go negotiate with Surtur, or I guess at that point, he's known as Ragnarok. But I think that's the moment where the prophecy changed, because you kind of see also, everybody has that reaction of why would Kratos do this? Because it's the last thing anybody expected. He's talked about vengeance the entire time, and now all of a sudden he's concerned with the lives of the innocent.
Yes, that part where he told Atreus, open your heart to it, feel their suffering. That's what makes you you. That was another big story beat that I was like, holy shit, this is showing how, mature Kratos has become just from the 2018 game to this. How much deeper his character is. I loved that scene. That's probably the scene that stuck out to me the most, was when Kratos turned and said, no, open your heart to them. That, I was like, chills, dude.
And with that, it not only changed how the fates were and everything, but it also really made an impact on how the game's ending came to be.
Yes.
Like, there was a lot more to it just from that one line, because I feel like if it wasn't said, we would have gotten a totally different ending.
I agree. I think that legitimately, and I was thinking about this earlier, I think that's what changed the prophecy, was Kratos finally coming down and realizing that Atreus is not the same as him, and that he shouldn't be treating him like he is the exact same. He doesn't need to make him another version of him. He needs to let him be his own person, his own god, all of that. So I think that's where that changed. Now, I want to go backwards a little bit, Matt, because I alluded to there being only one other cutscene that gave me chills in this game, as serious as the ones that we were talking about earlier, and that is the scene right before the start of Ragnarok, where Kratos gives his speech, Freya kind of gives her talk. They get the troops rallied. They've got the Valkyries on their side. They've got the elves of Alfheim united, and they're on their side. The army of the dead is on their side from Helheim. The moment Kratos blows Gjallarhorn and the realms start opening up,
yes,
gave me serious in-game Portals vibes from the MCU. That is and I don't know that I've seen a cutscene in a game this year that gave me the kind of feeling I felt when that happened.
Yep. I think one of the scenes, and I mentioned this, one of the scenes that gave me chills, since we're on that subject now, is when after Kratos and Atreus rescued the moon, which had been stolen.
Yes.
And they find basically the wolf deities that control day and night.
Yeah, Skull and Hati. Yeah.
Exactly. And we see this in that one trailer that we got back at the PlayStation Showcase. And everybody was so like calling those wolves like one of them Fenrir at the time, which was like
IGN
I don't think
did that, yeah.
So when you release the moon, and then Atreus shoots the arrow up there, and then I believe Hati like stands up and then just runs off into the sky, and then it just changes from day to night. That was so cool. With the addition of like the sound effect of the wolf howling, just I got chills from that scene, and I still get chills every time that you do it, since that's such a big thing that you do in Vanaheim is you change the day and night cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there are just so many moments in this story that I will stick with me for a very long time when I think about like cinematics and video games. This game takes them all to another level. So to kind of put a wrap on things, we'll talk now about the ending, and then we're already deep into this episode. We haven't even gotten to side content yet. So again, we told you, long episode. We appreciate everybody for sticking with us. But talking about the ending, so you battle Thor again, and again, Kratos does something that's not in his character, in that when he has Thor beaten, instead of killing him, he tells him, no, we must be better. The same words he said right before he killed Baldur in 2018. The same words saying that we must be better. And you have this moment of redemption for Thor that for me made the entire character. It made Ryan Hurst's performance even better, because you see that despite he's a god, there's a lot of humanity within Thor, within Lady Sif, within Thrud, their daughter. There's a lot of humanity within them that isn't just evil Aesir. And that's one thing I wanted to brag about on the writing before we talk about the ending in depth. I liked how, even though the Aesir were obviously the villains of this game, Odin, outside of a couple moments, is never portrayed as this evil bastard. He is portrayed as a very fair, a very calm, and a very reasonable person. Calm and reasonable, LOL. That's funny that I use that terminology. But he's portrayed that way. He's not portrayed as some madman. He's portrayed as someone. He tells Atreus when he comes to Asgard, you're free to go whenever. You are not a prisoner here. You're always welcome. You do not have to live in fear here. You're not living. He tells Kratos in the beginning of the game that, he killed Magni and Modi in the first game. He killed Baldur. Kratos asked him what he wants. He said, I just want peace. He doesn't want blood. He said, seek no quarrel with me, and I will have none with you. I love how the Aesir were portrayed that, despite the fact that these are villainous people, or villainous gods, there's another side to them that we hadn't seen just yet. So, you end up fighting Odin, you kill him, and Kyle, funny enough, the panel that you saw in Jotunheim that seemingly depicted Kratos dying in Atreus' arms, instead, it turns out to be Odin.
That shit was wild. Like, I knew, I was like, there is some very significant reason that at the end of 2018's game, they decided to show us this exact moment. And I was waiting for it the whole game. I was like, you know what? They're going to kill off Kratos. This is it. He's going to die. And then at the very end, in a turn of the fucking tables, it was Odin who had his soul taken.
And put into one of the marbles, yeah.
Yeah, it was not the ashes like we originally thought being taken on by Atreus. Odin's soul being put in the marble. And that was such a compelling moment for Atreus, for Kratos, for Freya, for them all to have gone this entire game, this entire time. Their one goal was to kill Odin, and the motherfucker who did it was Sindri.
Hey, shout out my boy Sindri, man. Listen.
Shout out Sindri.
I hate that he had this little heel turn, but man, shout out Sindri for getting that moment and kind of getting that redemption. Matt, that's what you called it when we talked about it earlier, getting that redemption for Brock's death.
Yeah.
I loved that he was the one that ultimately got to strike the killing blow. Thacker, you had something to add?
I did. What the one thing that I found really interesting in that entire ending scene is Kratos had mentioned early in the game that it was wrong of him to take the choice of life or death from Freya, and in that ending scene of actually being able to give her that choice again was breathtaking and truly
Yes.
amazing to actually see. I love the fact that Sindri got the final blow on it. I think my only complaint on it was Sindri, like, you kind of don't get a chance to have Sindri's forgiveness.
I think that we'll see that in
And
DLC. I have to be honest, they've said that they're going to drop content for this game. I think we'll see that in DLC.
I hope so, because like I said, I feel like, especially with how close Atreus and Sindri were, for Atreus to not get that forgiveness when he really hadn't done anything wrong, I felt was just a little underwhelming.
Well,
You know,
And
the way I felt was I don't think his character arc's over. I don't think Sindri's character arc is over. That's just me, though.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
actually, sitting here saying all of this and thinking about it, I have a theory that we're not going to get Sindri's forgiveness. His story is over because this is going to show us that our actions have consequences and it's
That's
not
fair.
always going to be a
Yeah,
happy
that's a good
ending.
point.
That's fair.
Sindri having such a tight relationship with Atreus, losing that and never getting it back will hurt almost as much as Brock's death, knowing that you fucked that up and you are. Because in real life, you can't go back. Freya may have forgiven you for what you did, but just because Freya did, that doesn't mean Sindri will.
Right.
And I think it would be interesting if they actually carry that, if they leave it at that and say, this is not a happy ending. These are the consequences of your actions. And look at the people it affects. Look at, how their life changed. That's because of you. It adds a little bit more, weight to everything that you did, because the story, I think, had a relatively happy ending for everybody that wasn't named Sindri.
So
And I
let's
feel
let's
that.
okay, yeah.
Good point.
I think
I
it's
feel
time
that.
to talk about the ending because there's a lot to unpack here. So you end up getting back to Midgard. Asgard is completely destroyed, and Angerboda says that she wants to show you, you being Atreus and Kratos. She just has something to show you, and what you find is another one of the Jotnar shrines, and in it is everything that just happened, and it was a hidden shrine, and the reason why it was hidden was because Faye, who, by the way, we haven't talked about this yet, the inclusion of Faye into this story with a face for that name, it's incredible. I really added something else, finally having a face to put with Faye's name, because all we could do before was imagine what she looked like. So now knowing what she looks like and knowing the kind of being that she was really added to the story. You find out that she hid this shrine away so that Kratos and Atreus would forge their own path and would not try to just, go down the road for this prophecy, or, wouldn't just try to turn their fate or twist their fate. You find out that she hid it so that they could make their own path and grow on their own. And I love that. Kyle, one of the most hard-hitting lines in the game was right here, because Atreus tells you that, he has got to go off on his own. That he wants to find the rest of the giants. He wants to see if he can bring his people back. And Kratos hits us with the ultimate feels line of, Loki may go, but Atreus remains. And dude, at that point, man, if the man tears weren't already falling, dude, the dam burst there, because that just an incredibly emotionally chilling line.
Yes, and for him to just say a handful of words and make us feel that emotion, that is masterclass storytelling. Because had we not experienced the 2018 game and this game the way that we did, that scene wouldn't have held as much weight. It would have been like, oh, that's cute. But like, we really felt that, it's actually a father-son relationship. They feel like real people. And when he said that, I was torn up. I was like, damn, dude, we really saw Atreus and Kratos become this father-son dynamic that now trusts each other enough to go off and on their own adventures and do things. And dude, 10 out of 10 right there. That's when I was like, this is my game of the year.
So Matt, that would be interesting if that was the ending. That would be a really good ending. But what we soon find out is that there's a second side to the Jotnar Shrine, and that second side depicts something that's not meant for Atreus, but just for Kratos. So he opens the shrine up, and he sees his journey from Athens to Midgard. And then I think the last panel and the reaction that Kratos has to the last panel, Matt, that for me was the selling point when this became my game of the year.
Yeah, the emotions that you could just tell that Kratos was feeling when he sees that last panel that depicts him in a statuesque form with people surrounding it. It harkens back to a conversation that Odin told Kratos. He was telling him, "You will never know what it feels like to be worshipped, to have people love you. You'll always be just this." What was it? He said exactly like
God killer.
A god
this
killer,
god
yeah.
killer, this monster. But Kratos seeing that on the shrine of him being loved, him being worshipped, him being what a god is supposed to be, it really hits home because he just thinking back to the original trilogy. Kratos was a monster. He killed. He did not consider anyone's feelings. He did what he did because of how the gods fucked him over, and he lost his family. So everything coming full circle to that, and Kratos just getting that kind of redemption for everything he's done, and to see that portrayed on the shrine was fantastic. And I know that they try really hard to not like make Kratos look like he's crying, but I could tell deep inside him that he was definitely crying internally.
I was crying on the outside, so I mean, if
Same
he wasn't
here.
crying, I
Same
was.
here.
I liked the picture. I like how they pictured him with the Leviathan axe, but also while wearing his Spartan attire, kind of noting how the two sides of his life have mixed, and he's become this god that everyone told him he wouldn't be. And to me, that was a beautiful way to end the game. Awesome story. I do agree with the critiques of it's not as tightly knit as 2018's, but I would counter that with this game's story is on a much grander scale than 2018's. 2018's game is very contained compared to this. So I think that for this being a much more open game and a much bigger game, I think that the story works 100% here, and the main thing that makes it work is that element of Faye hiding the shrine away so that Kratos and Atreus wouldn't try to fulfill some prophecy, that they instead would build their own path and walk that path. So to close the episode out, let's talk about the side content, because there's a lot of that in this game as well. And Thacker, I gotta say, and I feel like I've said this a lot to Kyle, and I'm gonna say it again now to y'all, I like 95% of the side content because I feel like there's a lot of really interesting favors here. However, the 5% I don't like, and I'm just going to say this, get your bingo cards out because I'm about to say the classic Rusty line. Boss fights, and particularly difficult boss fights, there's a reason why From Software is considered the king of creating difficult boss fights that still feel fair, because the new Valkyrie Queen and the King of the Berserkers, you two can fuck off. I absolutely hated both of those fights. I've beaten them, thank God, at this point. But Thacker, let's talk about the strength of the side content. I feel like there's a lot of stuff here, and you get a lot of value for what we paid for the game.
Oh, most definitely. Even not even huge side pieces, but ones that you have to find, such as rescuing these creatures, right?
The lingworms, yeah. Or the lindworms, yeah.
Not even just those, but like in
the
Alpine
stags,
being the giant jellyfish in
the half
Svartalfheim. Yeah, in Svartalfheim, being the whale, like getting to actually find things to do that aren't just given to you by NPCs was absolutely incredible. You got so much to do. I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw one of the Odin doors and everything that you have to unlock, Rusty, I remember telling you, I was like, they did not add the Valkyries again. I don't want to do this again.
Which, to an extent, you're not completely that they didn't completely re-add the Valkyries in. They just added the worst one.
Yep. And 15 berserkers.
And 12.
40 berserkers.
Three. There's only three. 85 berserkers.
Yeah, the side content in this game was phenomenal. I mean, there was so much to flesh out all the side characters and really give them other cutscenes that are outside of the main story, like the cutscene that you get when you beat the Valkyrie Queen 2.0. I loved the interaction between her and Kratos and Freya because they didn't want to kill her. They told her, they tried to reason with her and say, this doesn't have to end this way. You know, we can do better. We can, rebuild together. And she just says, finish it. That was another one of those, it leaves you wanting that closure. Kind of like Sindri, how it's like it's not a happy ending. It's like, fuck, dude. Like, I wanted her to just say, yes, I'm going to join you. But you end up having to kill her. And, I know I hate that fucking fight. But the cutscene after it was well worth it. And I, almost felt sad for the Valkyrie Queen when they killed her because I was like, shit, dude, like, she literally lost everything, and her only, reasoning for fighting us is because we just killed, her family, and, we just destroyed Asgard, and then she lost that. She quite literally just lost everything, and given the choice, she chose death over living because it was that, she was suffering that much. That was a really heavy moment.
I'll give you another example of a heavy moment. When you free the Lingbacher in Svartalfheim, this big whale, this whale-type creature that has been turned into this island, and they used its oil for lanterns for Odin. The story behind that is that Mimir was actually the one that enslaved it when he was, when he was working with Odin. And Mimir believes that in freeing it and breaking the chains, that it'll be happy and then it'll go off and live, and then when you break the chains it doesn't move. You go up to it and you kind of get this feeling that it's just used to living in chains, and I think that's the exact line that Kratos has, is that it's grown used to living in chains, to living as a slave essentially. And it's, again, you have the best intentions to try to fix something and there's no happy ending, there's no closure. You go back to Svartalfheim, the Lingbacher is still going to be there. It's still going to be there, and it's never going to leave because it's just grown accustomed. There's a line in the middle of that quest that I love because of just, again, how perfectly written and how perfectly voiced it is, about how, it's, I think Mimir says something along the lines of, this creature's probably spent countless winters wishing it was dead, but hopefully when it's free and then Kratos cuts him off, it will still wish for death. Because it's lost so much of its life to slavery like that. Yeah. And it's so hard hitting. And again, it just lines up with that, it's not, you don't always get a happy ending. So it's really, really interesting. One other little side bit we want to talk about, Thacker. Let's talk about our favorite chime boy, because Ratatoskr has, again, one of the best lines in the game. I'll let you talk about him.
Oh man, so shout out to my employee David for telling me about this. I didn't even know it was a thing, didn't even think about it. But Ratatoskr being the
Tosker, it's an O, you dummy. We're gonna put you on the board if you're not careful.
Give me my point.
Anyways, go ahead.
But no, so being one of the guardians of Yggdrasil, and he ends up giving you a chime that you can summon him for anytime you need to talk to him or give him some of the Limworm, anything like that. Some of his side missions, you can end up summoning him with this chime. Well, David one day was telling me, hey, if you hit that chime repeatedly, he ends up yelling at you. I'm like, there's no way. Well, over the weekend, while Rusty was in town, I was like, David told me about this. Do you want to see if it's true? And we ended up testing it. This man sits there. This squirrel sits there, and you're ringing it, and he's like, "Oh no, I'm not easily annoyed or anything like this," and just keep going, and finally he yells at you, and he yells at you for the funniest thing ever, and has now become my ringtone of "I'm with the stupid chimes."
It's one of the funniest moments in the game, man, and it's just this little hidden thing that you wouldn't find otherwise.
And it's hilarious. And
It was pretty funny.
out of all of his like emotion characters, Bitter's being the best, that one line just kind of beats any of his emotions.
I agree. I think that you look at this game from top to bottom, and I think it's very clear how we all feel about this game. There's a lot of really good things that this game did. There's excellent storytelling, excellent character development. The gameplay's deeper on every level. I am glad that I don't have to be in the group that decides between this and Elden Ring for Game of the Year, because that's a tough choice. I will say this, and I think that we all need to just remember this year for this reason. I think we will look back on this year in 20 years, and we're going to say that this year we got two of the greatest games that were ever made in God of War Ragnarok and Elden Ring. So I think that's as good a spot as any to end this well over an hour-long episode at this point. So that is going to do it for us. This has been our, I don't want to say review, because that almost feels like I'm fucking cheating and sliding us, because we did a lot more than review this game. But that's been our episode for God of War Ragnarok. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Side Mission Pod. You can find us on Facebook and TikTok at Side Mission Podcast as well. For the boys, for Kyle, for Matt, for Thacker, I'm Rusty. Thanks for listening.
Stop with the stupid chimes.